So what is addiction? Addiction is when the brain becomes hostage to its own functioning. The pleasure centers in the brain are raised so high when a substance is used or an action is performed that joy becomes nearly unattainable from that point on. And the body begins to crave that substance or action regularly and starts to spiral downward into the cycle of addiction. And while the gap is quickly closing, there's a trend of substance addictions being much more prevalent in males than females. However, the process addictions are much more prevalent in females than males. Take eating disorders, for example. A woman is much more likely to be treated for something like bulimia or anorexia or nervosia than a man is. The reason behind these trends could be the stigma surrounding these addictions. For example, when a woman is addicted to alcohol, it's seen as socially unacceptable or strange. Whereas with sex addictions or eating disorders, a man is much less likely to seek treatment because he's surrounded by the stigma that he is supposed to be confident in who he is and he's a man and nothing should ever be wrong with him. When I first thought about addiction, I thought it must have been a moral failure and people who struggled with addictions were just struggling with something within themselves. I thought there was absolutely no way I could be addicted to anything, even with a family history of functioning alcoholics. But I gave up social media for 28 days, and that made me realize just how much of my daily life was consumed by the need to be a part of something larger than myself. I found myself constantly craving the attention of my followers, or that I was letting them down, or I was missing out on things that my friends were doing. And it became very clear very quickly I may have been addicted. But since I've gotten back on social media, it's become very clear to me how an addict falls back into that cycle of addiction. And it's a terrible cycle. You feel so amazing when you give something up, and then the cravings start to hit. And so that makes you want to use again, and when you do use, you feel so good. And then you start to feel bad because you realize you caved and you gave in to those cravings. And so you try and give it up again, and the cycle starts all over. Addiction is not a moral failure, it is a disease. And these days anyone can be an addict. With theories like genetics and the moral model, you never know. Addiction begins when the initial high is sought after, but can no longer be attained due to the hedonic set point being raised so high that the normal dopamine surges have been removed. And from that point on, it's only possible to reach that initial high by using more or more often than before. But there's hope, and recovery is possible. A recovery is aided by a support system. So the more support you have, the better off you may be. And recovery may look like going to an AA meeting or going to a treatment center where you're able to live throughout your recovery process. Or it may just be having an amazing group of people who support you and understand your addiction and are there for you throughout every step of your recovery process. But finding the right group for you is key, and knowing that you have an addiction and knowing your addiction well is the most important thing of all.